The morning sky above Seoul turned dark with ships that should not exist. Tae-jin stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic building, watching the massive vessels descend through Earth's atmosphere like falling mountains. Each ship was larger than any human city, their hulls gleaming with a metal that seemed to drink in sunlight and reflected as something different, something wrong. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his translator device, though he knew it would be useless. The aliens had made that clear in their first transmission. The Valtharians had arrived 3 days ago with a message that bypassed every government protocol and appeared simultaneously on every screen across Earth. Their spokesperson, a tall being with elongated limbs and skin that shifted between purple and gold, had introduced themselves with what appeared to be a smile. The translator rendered their words in flat, mechanical tones that somehow conveyed condescension perfectly. They called Earth the nursery world, and humans the newest children who required guidance from their betters. Tae-jin had spent 2 decades studying xenolinguistics, preparing for a moment humanity had always dreamed of. First contact with alien intelligence. He had imagined it would be beautiful, terrifying, or strange. He had not expected it to feel like being patted on the head by someone who thought you were cute, but stupid. Now he stood in the landing zone with 40 other humans, representing every major nation and scientific institution on Earth. Hana stood to his left, her engineering credentials making her the youngest person in the delegation at 32. She kept touching the small device clipped to her belt, a nervous habit she had developed while working on the quantum drive that had finally given humanity the stars, or so they had thought. The Valtharians had made it clear that humanity's FTL breakthrough was adorable, like a child building a treehouse while adults constructed skyscrapers. The landing ramp extended from the nearest ship with a hiss of pressurized air. Tae-jin counted 12 Valtharian delegates descending, but his attention fixed on the 3 who walked behind them. They wore different robes, deep blue instead of the silver the others preferred, and they moved with an odd stiffness. Priests, according to the intelligence briefing. The Valtharians apparently had a religion, though they had not explained its nature beyond saying it involved the first voices who had brought civilization to the galaxy 500,000 years ago. The lead Valtharian diplomat, who had instructed humans to call him Ambassador Kelthrin, approached with that same unsettling smile. His translator box spoke before his mouth finished moving, creating a disorienting echo. Humans of Earth, we have come to welcome you into the galactic community. Your species shows promise despite your primitive development. The Valtharian Empire extends its protection and guidance. You will serve, you will learn, and in time you may earn a voice in the greater chorus of civilization. Tae-jin had prepared his response for 3 days, working with linguists from 17 countries. He spoke in Korean first, then the translator rendered it in English and Mandarin for the other delegates. We appreciate your contact, Ambassador Kelthrin. However, Earth is not seeking protection or guidance. We would prefer to establish a relationship of equals, sharing knowledge and resources fairly. The silence that followed made Tae-jin's stomach clench. Then Kelthrin laughed. The sound reminded Tae-jin of wind chimes, beautiful but hollow. The other Valtharians joined in, a cascade of melodic mockery. Equals? Kelthrin's translator somehow conveyed amusement and pity. Your species achieved basic FTL travel 3 months ago. The Valtharian Empire has explored the galaxy for 60,000 years. Your planet has 1 language family with space capability. We govern 17,000 worlds with 500 distinct linguistic groups. Equality is not a matter of desire, human. It is a matter of reality. Hana stepped forward before Tae-jin could stop her. Then why are you here? If we're so primitive, why bother with us at all? Kelthrin's face did something complicated that the translator interpreted as pleased surprise. An excellent question. Your system contains asteroid fields rich in rare elements. Your world sits at a useful junction of navigation lanes, and your species, while limited, shows aptitude for manual labor in hazardous environments. You will mine the asteroids. You will build way stations for our ships. You will provide resources. In exchange, we will not allow other species to exploit you. We will teach you to speak properly, to think properly, to be properly civilized. The word properly hit Tae-jin like a physical blow. He glanced at the Valtharian priests and caught something unexpected. One of them, an older-looking individual with paler gold skin, was staring at Tae-jin with an expression that the translator could not interpret. It was not condescension. It looked almost like fear. Daeho, the military captain, spoke next. His voice was measured, careful. And if we decline your offer? Decline? Kelthrin tilted his head in a gesture that looked wrong on his alien anatomy. You misunderstand, human. This is not negotiation. This is instruction. However, we are not cruel. The Empire recognizes that young species often resist their own best interests. We will give you 1 Earth year to consider, to explore your limited options, to realize the futility of independence. When we return, you will accept our guidance, or you will learn why 17,000 worlds chose wisdom over pride. The delegation ended there. The Valtharians returned to their ships and departed, leaving Earth's sky empty again. But Taejin could not shake the memory of that priest's expression. He requested the meeting footage and watched it 17 times that night, focusing on the moment when he had spoken Korean. There, the priest's eyes had widened. His breathing had changed, visible in the slight movement of his robes. And for just a fraction of a second, he had looked at Taejin not with condescension but with recognition. Hana found him in his office at 3 a.m, still watching the footage. She set down 2 cups of coffee and sat without asking. You saw it too, she said. It was not a question. He recognized something, Taejin said. When I spoke Korean, it meant something to him. Their priest worshipped the first voices, Hana said slowly. Ancient aliens who brought civilization to the galaxy. What if those ancient aliens spoke something that sounded like Korean? It was ridiculous. It was impossible. But Taejin could not stop thinking about the fear in that priest's eyes. Fear that humans might be something other than primitive children playing with fire. Fear that the Empire's carefully constructed hierarchy might have a crack in its foundation. The year of consideration had begun, and Taejin suspected they would need every day of it. Not to accept the Valtharian offer, but to understand why their gods might recognize a language from Earth. The excavation site near Busan had been a routine geological survey until Jiwoo's team hit something that should not exist. The drill had broken on material that testing suggested was 15 million years old, yet showed signs of artificial construction. Within 2 weeks, half the scientific community on Earth had redirected their attention to a hole in the ground that kept getting deeper and stranger. Jiwoo stood in the main chamber now, 300 meters below the surface, and wondered how many laws of archaeology she was breaking. The chamber was perfectly circular, 50 meters across, with walls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. In the center sat a structure that looked like a tree made of crystal, its branches spreading up toward the ceiling and down into the floor. Each branch held what looked like glass spheres, hundreds of them, glowing with a soft blue light that had activated the moment they cleared away the last of the surrounding rock. Sumin was already running every test she could think of. The physicist had not slept in 3 days, surviving on coffee and pure fascination. Her instruments covered every surface of the chamber, cables running back to the surface like technological roots. The crystalline structure is impossible, Sumin said for the 20th time. She was examining a tablet filled with data that made no sense. It should not be stable. The atomic arrangement violates several principles of material science. Yet here it is, solid and functional and somehow broadcasting information. Broadcasting to what? Jiwoo asked. Everything. Radio waves, quantum signals, gravitational fluctuations. It is like a lighthouse, except instead of light, it is sending out pure data. And it has been doing this for millions of years, waiting for someone to listen. Taejin arrived that afternoon with a team of linguists and computer specialists. The government had classified the site immediately, but word had spread through academic channels. Everyone wanted to see the impossible thing under Busan. Taejin looked tired, his eyes red from long nights reviewing Valtharian transmissions and trying to find patterns in their religious texts. Can you decode any of it? He asked Sumin. Some. The mathematical constants are universal. Physics does not change based on who discovers it. I found sequences that match prime numbers. Then the basic physical constants, mass of an electron, speed of light, that sort of thing. Anyone with advanced mathematics could understand those parts. But then it shifts into something more complex. Patterns that might be language or instructions or both. Jiwoo pointed to one of the crystal spheres. We need to access the data more directly. The passive scanning is not enough, but I am afraid of damaging it. A young engineer named Hyun spoke up from the corner. He had been studying the crystalline structure for hours. I think we are supposed to touch it. Look at the base of the structure. There are grooves there, perfectly sized for human hands, or at least humanoid hands. The room fell silent. The implication was clear and disturbing. This structure had been built long before humans existed, yet it seemed designed for them. Tae-jin approached the crystal tree slowly. His training as a linguist had taught him to look for patterns, for meanings hidden in structure. The grooves did look like handholds, and something about the whole chamber felt intentional, like a message waiting to be opened. He placed his hands in the grooves. The chamber exploded with light, not painful but overwhelming. A flood of blue radiance that seemed to carry information directly into his brain. Images cascaded through his mind faster than thought. Star maps showing a galaxy full of life, structures like this one scattered across thousands of worlds, and beings tall and graceful with features that were almost human but not quite, speaking in voices that resonated with familiar sounds. The light faded. Tae-jin found himself on his knees, tears streaming down his face. Sumin was shouting questions, but he could not hear her properly. His ears were ringing with echoes of that voice, those voices speaking words he almost understood. Jiwoo helped him to a chair. "What did you see?" "The architects," Tae-jin whispered. "That is what they called themselves. They came from somewhere else, somewhere outside the galaxy. They seeded life on hundreds of worlds. Not just life, but intelligent life. They gave us language, culture, the basic tools to build civilization, and then they left." "Why?" Sumin demanded. "Why would they do that?" "Because they were dying. Their own civilization was ending, and they wanted to leave children behind. Not copies of themselves, but something new. Something that could grow in different directions, adapt to different worlds. They built these installations as gifts, libraries of knowledge, waiting for their children to grow up enough to access them." Hyun was recording everything, his hands shaking with excitement or fear. "How long ago was this?" 500,000 years, Tae-jin said. "Maybe more. The timeline in my head is not clear." But the last part was clear. The warning. "Warning about what?" Jiwoo asked. "Something called the Silence. A threat they could not overcome alone. They hoped their children, all of us across the galaxy, would eventually unite and face it together. That was the whole point. Create diversity. Create strength through different perspectives, different ways of thinking. Then bring everyone together when the time was right." Sumin was already pulling up linguistic analysis on her tablet. If they seeded Earth with language, with culture, there should be traces. Patterns that match other worlds they influenced. Over the next 3 weeks, the team worked nonstop. They decoded more data from the crystal spheres, finding linguistic patterns that matched human languages with stunning accuracy. Korean showed the strongest correlation, 78% similarity to the architect root language. But Japanese, Turkish, and Finnish also showed significant matches. Languages that human linguists had always found difficult to classify showed clear connections to the architect baseline. The implications were staggering. Humans were not primitive newcomers to the galaxy. They were inheritors of the most advanced civilization ever known. Their languages were not crude noise, but preserved fragments of the architect tongue, kept pure by millions of years of isolation. Then Tae-jin made the connection that changed everything. He pulled up the Valtharian religious texts he had been studying, comparing them to the architect data. The match was there, but weaker. Valtharian sacred language showed only 42% similarity to the architect root. Their most holy words, the phrases they believed came directly from the gods, were corrupted versions of maintenance logs and technical manuals. "They have been worshipping instruction manuals," Sumin said, a note of hysteria in her voice. "Their entire religion, their entire social hierarchy is based on misunderstood technical documentation." Jiwoo was pacing now, her mind racing through the implications. "And we can read it. Humans can actually understand what the architects wrote, better than the Valtharians who have been studying it for thousands of years." Tae-jin felt cold despite the warm chamber. That priest who looked afraid, he recognized something when I spoke Korean. He heard the architect language and he knew. He knew that humans were a threat to everything the Valtharian Empire believes about itself. The team looked at each other, understanding dawning. They had 6 months left before the Valtharians returned. 6 months to decide what to do with knowledge that could shatter an empire, unite a galaxy, or start a war that would consume both. In the crystal tree, the data spheres continued to glow, patient and eternal, waiting for humanity to choose its path forward. Youngja had always been good at stealing things. Not physical objects, though she could do that too. She stole information, patterns, secrets hidden in data streams. The government had recruited her from prison 5 years ago, offering her a choice between 20 years of incarceration or working for their intelligence division. She had chosen freedom and she had been very good at her job. Now she sat in a small apartment in New Singapore, watching encrypted Valtharian transmissions flow across her screens. The aliens had left observation posts throughout Earth's solar system, small automated stations that monitored human activity and sent reports back to the Empire. Young Jia had hacked into 3 of them over the past 2 months, careful to leave no trace of her intrusion. What she found made her hands shake. The Valtharians were terrified. Their internal communications, stripped of the condescending tone they used with humans, revealed panic at the highest levels of their government. The priests had filed urgent reports after the diplomatic meeting, claiming that human speech patterns matched sacred texts with dangerous accuracy. The military wanted to simply destroy Earth and claim it was an accident. The politicians were divided, some arguing that humans could be useful, others insisting they were an existential threat. But the most interesting files were the religious texts themselves. Young Jia had learned enough of the architect language from Tae Jin's team to recognize patterns. She spent 3 sleepless nights comparing Valtharian scriptures with the data from the Busan installation. The results confirmed what she had suspected. The Valtharians could not read their own holy books. Not really. They had memorized sounds passed down through generations, but the actual meaning had been lost. What they called divine mysteries were simply passages they could not translate. What they called prophecies were maintenance schedules and scientific observations. Their entire civilization was built on beautiful nonsense. She sent her findings to Tae Jin, who immediately brought in Hyunwoo. The ambassador had been working on establishing diplomatic backchannels with other alien species, those who lived under Valtharian rule, but might be sympathetic to Earth's cause. He had connections young Jia could only guess at, and a talent for making friends in dangerous places. Hyunwoo studied her data for 2 hours before speaking. This is enough to start a civil war in the Empire. Their whole social system is based on linguistic purity. The ruling families claim descent from those who preserved the sacred language most accurately. If people learn that humans speak it better than anyone, the entire hierarchy collapses. Good, young Jia said flatly. They deserve it for treating us like children. Maybe, Hyunwoo replied carefully. But a collapsing empire is dangerous. Desperate people do terrible things. If we release this information, we need to be ready for the consequences. Tae Jin had been thinking the same thing. He called a meeting of the core team, everyone who knew the full truth about the architects. They gathered in a secure facility deep underground, away from prying satellites and monitoring systems. We have 3 choices, Tae Jin explained, his voice heavy with exhaustion. First, we hide what we know. Accept Valtharian rule, hope they never discover the truth themselves. Second, we negotiate. Use our knowledge as leverage to demand better treatment, maybe autonomy within their empire. Third, we reveal everything, broadcast the truth across the galaxy and deal with whatever happens next. Hana spoke first. The first option is not an option. They will discover the truth eventually, probably by studying us. Better to control how and when it comes out. Daeho nodded agreement. His military analysts had been running scenarios. The Valtharians have ships, weapons, technology we cannot match. But they also have vulnerabilities. Their empire is vast, held together by religious authority and fear. If that authority breaks, their control breaks. The question is whether we can survive the breaking. Jiwoo was studying a new file that young Jia had just decrypted. Her face had gone pale. There is something else. The Valtharian priests have been searching for architect installations for centuries. They found some but could never fully activate them. The installations require linguistic keys, specific phrases spoken in the architect language. The priests have been trying for thousands of years. They have failed every time, because they do not speak it correctly, Sumin realized. They memorized corrupted versions. They lost the proper pronunciation centuries ago. But we have not, Tae Jin said quietly. We can activate every architect installation in the galaxy. We have the keys to technology and knowledge the Valtharians have spent millennia seeking. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Humans were not just linguistically similar to the architects. They were functionally the architect's heirs, able to access resources that the dominant galactic power could only dream of reaching. Young-Ja pulled up another file. "This is a Valtharian religious ceremony I intercepted. Watch the priest in the center." The video showed a grand temple, thousands of Valtharians gathered in prayer. The head priest spoke words that sounded beautiful but meant nothing. Young-Ja enhanced the audio, then played a comparison. Tae-jin speaking the same passage in Korean, translated directly from the architect data. The difference was stark. The Valtharian version was like a broken echo, musical but empty. The Korean version resonated with meaning, with purpose. The ceremony is supposed to invoke blessings from the first voices. Young-Ja explained. "They have done this for 10,000 years. It has never worked, but they keep trying. Now watch what happens when I correct the pronunciation." She had created a simulation, feeding the proper architect phrases into a model of the temple's acoustics. The result made everyone sit up straight. The temple was not just a building. It was an architect installation, dormant and waiting. Spoken with correct pronunciation, the prayers became activation codes. Lights appeared in the simulation. Technology waking up after millennia of silence. "They have been standing in front of the answer for 10,000 years, Hyunwoo whispered. "And they could not see it because they could not speak it." Tae-jin made his decision. "We tell them, not just the Valtharians, everyone. Every species under their rule. Every independent civilization watching to see how this plays out. We broadcast the truth in every language we can translate. We show them what the architects actually said, what they actually wanted. Unity, not empire. Cooperation, not domination." "The Valtharians will see it as an attack," Daeho warned. "It is an attack," Tae-jin agreed. "But not on the Valtharian people. On the lie they have been living. Some will hate us for it. Some will thank us. All of them will have to face the truth that their gods spoke in our tongue, not theirs." The team spent the next month preparing. They compiled every scrap of architect language they could access. Every translation, every comparison to existing languages. They created videos showing humans activating architect technology that Valtharian priests could not touch. They prepared documentation proving that Korean and several other Earth languages were closer to the architect root than any language in the Empire. Young-jae built the transmission system that would bypass every communication filter the Valtharians had. When they broadcast, every screen in the Empire would receive it simultaneously. There would be no way to suppress or contain the information. Hana modified human satellites to survive the electromagnetic warfare she expected would follow. Daeho positioned military assets, knowing they would need to defend Earth against the initial backlash. They waited until the Valtharians were 3 weeks from Earth, close enough to receive the transmission quickly, but not close enough to immediately attack. Then on a cold morning in Seoul, Tae-jin sat in front of a camera and spoke the words that would shatter an empire. He spoke in Korean, in architect, in English, in Valtharian. He recited their most sacred texts with perfect pronunciation, then explained what the words actually meant. He showed footage of humans activating architect installations, while Valtharian priests stood helpless. He told the galaxy that the gods the Valtharians worshipped had never wanted worship. They had wanted children who could work together, not masters and slaves. The transmission went out across every channel. Millions of worlds received it simultaneously. And in temples across the Valtharian Empire, lights began to turn on for the first time in 500,000 years. The Valtharian battle fleet arrived at Earth's orbit ahead of schedule, and they arrived angry. Daeho watched them come through the observation window of humanity's flagship, a ship they had named Architect's Hope. It was a small vessel compared to the Valtharian warships, barely 300 meters long, but Hana's team had built it using principles learned from the Busan installation. It moved like nothing else in space, dancing through trajectories that conventional physics said were impossible. 16 capital ships, reported Captain Minho from the tactical station, 200 support vessels, enough firepower to glass Earth 3 times over. Daeho kept his face calm even as his heart raced. "Open a channel." The view screen filled with Ambassador Kelthrin's face, but the condescending smile was gone. The Valtharian diplomat looked furious, his skin flushed a deep purple that their translators interpreted as rage. "You have committed heresy," Kelthrin said without preamble. "You have profaned the sacred texts. You have spread lies about the first voices. The punishment for such crimes is extinction." Tae-jin stepped into view of the camera. He had not slept in 2 days. coordinating responses to the chaos their broadcast had created across the galaxy. We have committed no heresy. We have only spoken the truth. The architects did not want worship. They wanted cooperation. Your empire has twisted their message for your own benefit. You speak with the confidence of children playing with forces you cannot understand. Kelthrin's translator was struggling to convey the venom in his words. You activated sacred sites. You violated holy places. You will be cleansed from the galaxy. The transmission cut off. Deho immediately issued orders. All ships, defensive positions. Activate the countermeasures. And pray that Hana's theories about architect technology actually work in combat. The Valtherian fleet advanced in a formation that had conquered thousands of worlds. Their weapons charged, energy readings spiking across human sensors. But before they could fire, something unexpected happened. 3 Valtherian ships broke formation. Their identification signals showed they were frontier patrol vessels, crews drawn from border worlds rather than the core systems. One of them broadcast on human frequencies. Earth vessels, this is Captain Velthar of the patrol ship Distant Song. We will not fire on the chosen speakers. The gods have spoken through you, and we will not commit the sin of silencing them. Chaos erupted in the Valtherian fleet. More ships began breaking formation, some moving to intercept those trying to attack Earth, others simply withdrawing from the engagement entirely. Deho watched in amazement as the grand fleet that had come to destroy humanity tore itself apart through internal conflict. But not all the Valtherians wavered. The core fleet, ships crewed by true believers and high-caste zealots, continued their attack. Energy beams lanced through space toward Earth, but Hana's countermeasures activated automatically. The Architect's Hope and its sister ships generated fields that bent space itself, redirecting attacks into empty void. It was technology the Architect installation had taught them, quantum manipulation that turned gravity into a shield. Return fire, Deho ordered, hating the necessity. Disable their weapons, avoid casualties if possible. Human ships darted through the Valtherian formation like birds harassing eagles. They were smaller, faster, and equipped with weapons that had not existed 3 months ago. Directed energy beams harvested from Architect designs cut through Valtherian shields with surgical precision. One by one, enemy ships went dark, their weapon systems destroyed but their life support intact. On Earth, billions watched the battle unfold through public broadcasts. In Seoul, crowds gathered around screens showing human ships holding their own against an empire that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. Some people prayed, some cheered, some simply watched in stunned silence as history pivoted on actions happening millions of kilometers above their heads. In the Valtherian Empire itself, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Young Jia monitored communications from across their territory, and the news was chaotic. Riots had broken out on dozens of worlds. Priests who tried to suppress the human broadcast found their own, temples turning against them as architect. Installations activated and revealed truths that contradicted. Millennia of doctrine. The most dramatic incident occurred on the Valtherian homeworld itself. The Grand Temple, the holiest site in the Empire, had stood at the center of their capital city for 8,000 years. When humans broadcast the correct pronunciation of the temple's activation phrases, the building came alive with light and sound. Holographic displays appeared, showing the actual history of the architects. Not gods demanding worship, but beings seeking to create diversity and cooperation among their children. The Valtherian masses, already shaken by the human revelation, watched as their highest priests struggled to explain why their most sacred site was calling them liars. Some riots turned violent, others became celebrations as people realized they were free from religious tyranny they had never questioned. The Empire's unity, built on shared faith and enforced hierarchy, began to crack at its foundations. Back in orbit around Earth, Ambassador Kelthrin made a desperate decision. His flagship, the Eternal Voice, accelerated directly toward Earth's surface. If he could not destroy humanity militarily, he would ram his massive vessel into their planet and take billions with him in nuclear fire. Deho saw the move immediately. Intercept course, maximum speed. Hana, tell me you have something that can stop a ship that size. Working on it, Hana replied from her station deep in the Architect's Hope. She was manipulating controls that looked more like musical instruments than ship systems, following instincts gained from weeks of studying architect technology. The installation data mentioned gravitic manipulation. I think I can create a field strong enough to hold them. You think? Science is mostly educated guessing. Shut up and let me concentrate. The architect's hope surged forward, its quantum drives pushing it to speeds that should have torn the ship apart. Human pilots felt their bodies compress as artificial gravity struggled to compensate. They intercepted the eternal voice at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, a tiny ship blocking a massive destroyer. Hana activated her gravitic field. Space twisted around the eternal voice, creating pockets of altered gravity that grabbed the ship like invisible hands. The Valtherian vessel shuddered, its momentum fighting against forces that bent reality itself. Metal screamed. Hull plates buckled. But slowly, impossibly, the eternal voice stopped. On the bridge of his dying flagship, Kelthrin watched his bridge crew scrambling to respond. Alarms blared. Systems failed. And through it all he heard something he had tried his entire life to ignore. The voice of truth spoken in human tongues telling him that his gods had never wanted this, had never wanted empire, dominion, hierarchy based on lies. He opened a channel to the human ship holding him captive. Tajin's face appeared on his screen, calm despite the battle raging around them. Why? Kelthrin asked, and for the first time his translator carried no condescension, only genuine confusion. Why would the first voices choose you? You are primitive, savage, new to the stars. Because we were isolated. Tajin replied gently. Because we had time to develop without interference. The architects wanted diversity, not uniformity. They wanted different solutions to problems, different perspectives. Your empire spent 50,000 years enforcing conformity, destroying difference, demanding everyone speak and think the same way. We spent that time growing wild and strange, preserving languages you lost, maintaining connections you severed. Then what do we do now? The question came out like a plea. Our empire is burning. Our faith is shattered. You have taken everything from us. No, Tajin said firmly. We have freed you. What happens next is your choice. But humanity will not accept subjugation, and we will not allow you to force it on others. The age of your empire is over. What comes next can be better if you let it. The battle ended not with victory or defeat, but with exhaustion and revelation. Half the Valtherian fleet had withdrawn, refusing to fight what they now saw as a holy war against the architect's true heirs. The other half sat disabled in space, their crews contemplating the ruins of everything they had believed. Deho ordered his ships to provide medical assistance to damaged Valtherian vessels. Humanity had won, but he took no joy in it. Wars ended, but peace had to be built, and the galaxy was watching to see what humanity would do with the power they had claimed. Kyungsu had been a xenobiologist before the architects changed everything. He had spent his career studying Earth organisms, trying to understand how life adapted to different environments. Now he stood in the Busan installation, watching something impossible communicate with him through patterns of light and sound that his brain interpreted as language. The architect AI called itself Keeper, though it clarified that was a translation of a concept rather than a name. It had awakened 6 weeks ago when human linguistic patterns activated dormant systems across the galaxy. For 500,000 years it had waited, a ghost in machines scattered across 100 worlds, patient and eternal. You have questions, Keeper said. Its voice resonated directly in Kyungsu's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. Your species always has questions. That is good. Curiosity is survival. What are you? Kyungsu asked. It was the simplest question and the most profound. I am memory. The architects could not survive, but they could record themselves. Their knowledge, their hopes, their warnings. I am what remains when biology fails but purpose endures. Why did you wait so long? Humanity has been here for hundreds of thousands of years. You could have helped us. You were not ready, Keeper replied without judgment. The architects learned that forced advancement destroys more than it creates. Species must grow at their own pace, face their own challenges, develop their own solutions. Intervention creates dependence. You needed to become strong enough to stand alone before you could stand together. Over the following months, Keeper shared knowledge carefully, releasing information in measured amounts. Medicine that could cure diseases humanity had struggled with for centuries. Physics that explained how to manipulate quantum fields. Engineering principles that would take human ships beyond anything the Valtherian Empire had achieved. but always with the understanding that humans had to implement these things themselves, had to truly understand rather than simply copy. Meanwhile, Mi Young found herself thrust into a role she had never wanted. Before the revelation, she had been a logistics coordinator, someone who arranged meetings and managed schedules. She had no diplomatic training, no grand ambitions, but she had something more valuable in the chaos following the Empire's collapse. She was someone who could listen without judgment, who could find practical solutions to complex problems. The Valtherian Empire had shattered into 17 successor states within 3 months. Some were democratic, others oligarchic. A few remained theocratic but with reformed doctrines acknowledging the truth about the architects. All of them faced the same problem: how to reorganize their societies when the fundamental assumptions about divinity, hierarchy, and cosmic order had been proven false. Representatives from these new governments gathered on a neutral station, one of the architect installations that Keeper had helped activate. Mi Young attended as Earth's unofficial ambassador, simply because she had a talent for cutting through complicated rhetoric to find what people actually needed. She sat across a table from a former Valtherian admiral named Calvin, who had fought against Earth in the battle before defecting to the human side. He looked exhausted, his skin a pale gold that indicated stress in his species. "My people are starving," Calvin said bluntly. "We built an economy around expansion and conquest. We imported food from subjugated worlds. Now those worlds are independent, and they do not want to trade with us. I do not blame them, but people are dying." Mi Young had prepared for this. Earth has surplus grain production. We can ship food while you reorganize your agricultural systems, but there needs to be a fair exchange. Technology for resources, knowledge for food. No more masters and servants. Fair, Calvin repeated the word like it was foreign. The Empire never taught us fairness. Only hierarchy. Those above take, those below give. How do we build something different? Carefully, Mi Young replied. With mistakes and corrections. With patience. The architects did not expect perfection. They expected growth. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. Species that had lived under Valtherian rule for thousands of years were discovering independence, with all its opportunities and challenges. Some thrived immediately. Others struggled. A few descended into civil wars as different factions fought over how to interpret the architect's legacy. But slowly, painfully, a new order began to emerge. Not an empire, but a coalition. The Galactic Assembly, they called it, for lack of a better term. Each species sent representatives. Each voice had equal weight. Decisions were made through consensus rather than decree. Humanity took on an unexpected role in this new galaxy. Not as rulers, though some humans had lobbied for that position. Not as military power, though Earth's fleet had grown formidable. Instead, humans became translators and mediators. Their linguistic connection to the architects made them uniquely positioned to activate and interpret architect installations. Their recent independence gave them credibility with species that distrusted the old powers. Taejin found himself training diplomats from a dozen worlds, teaching them not just the architect language but the philosophy behind it. Unity through diversity, strength through cooperation, the understanding that no species had all the answers, but together they might find enough. Hana led engineering teams that combined human innovation with architect principles and Valtherian practical experience. Ships emerged from these collaborations that surpassed anything built by any single species. Medicine that worked across multiple biologies. Communication systems that could translate not just words but cultural context. Daeho transitioned from military commander to security coordinator, helping former enemies learn to trust each other enough to share space. It was harder than any battle he had fought. Centuries of resentment did not disappear because a human told them to cooperate. But he was patient and gradually old wounds began to heal. 6 months after the battle, Keeper summoned the core human team back to Busan. They gathered in the crystal chamber where everything had started, looking older and more tired than they had been. Kyung-soo stood with them, having spent more time talking to the AI than anyone else. "You have done well," Keeper said. "Better than the architects expected, honestly. They were not certain any of their children would survive to this point." "What do you mean?" Jiwoo asked. "You said you were here to help us unite, to face the silence. What is the silence?" The chamber darkened. Holographic displays appeared showing the galaxy from above. Beautiful spirals of stars and dust. Then the perspective zoomed out, showing the space between galaxies, and in that space something moved. Not empty void, but something darker, something that consumed light and left absence behind. The architects called it the Silence, Keeper explained. A force that ends civilizations, not through violence or conquest, but through entropy. It accelerates the heat death of organized systems. Stars burn out faster, technology fails. Even thought becomes difficult as energy disperses into chaos. The architects fought it alone and lost. They hoped that by creating many different species, with many different perspectives and technologies, their children might find solutions they could not. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. They had been so focused on Valtherian politics and galactic reorganization that they had forgotten the original purpose. The architects had not seeded the galaxy to create peace and harmony as ends in themselves. They had created diversity as a survival strategy. How long do we have? Somin asked, her scientific mind already cataloging the problem. 3,000 years, perhaps 5,000. The silence moves slowly, but it is coming. And when it arrives, every species in this galaxy will face extinction unless you find a way to stop it. Mi Young laughed, a sound that started bitter but became something else, something determined. So we united the galaxy, shattered an empire, rewrote the rules of civilization, and it turns out that was just the practice run. The real challenge is still ahead. Yes, Keeper said simply. The architects believed you could do it. All of you working together might be strong enough. Humanity was the key that started this process. But you are not the solution alone. No single species is. That is the point. Taejin looked at his friends, his team, these people who had changed the galaxy through courage and truth. Then we had better get to work. We have a few thousand years to save everything. Should be plenty of time. The joke fell flat, but the determination behind it was real. They left the chamber together, already planning. Humanity had gone from a species facing subjugation to one of the key powers in a new galactic order. They had learned the truth about their heritage, had spoken in the tongues of gods, had shattered an empire with words and truth. But the real test was still coming. The Silence would not care about linguistic heritage or political systems. It would not negotiate or recognize authority. It was entropy, chaos, the end of all organized matter and energy. Against that, the galaxy would need everything. Every species, every perspective, every innovation that diversity could provide. The architects had planted seeds across the stars, hoping some combination of their children would be strong enough to face what they could not. Now those seeds had grown into a forest, different species reaching toward the same sun, roots intertwined beneath the surface.